Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of The Exercise Mechanic. Today, we're going to be talking again about online training, but this time we're going to be talking about how to structure your online training or hybrid training offering, ranging everywhere from how to set your rates, how to create your offer from online to hybrid, your intake process, assessments, and much more. I'm once again joined by the Exercise Mechanic team, Brett and Ryan. Hello, gents.
Can we call this online training 2 electric boogaloo? I mean,
Yes,
it is kind of appropriate, right? Like there's some movement, there's some electricity going on. Like it's thematically close, right?
electric boogaloo.
Yeah, it's from a crappy 80s movie called Breakin' 2, all about breakdancing.
Great. You know what? If I can find a way to put this into the
This is
Thule,
the
we'll do
hottest
it.
start we've ever had to
Yeah,
an
is this
episode,
a
I
bit of
think.
a deep reference there? digging,
Man,
digging that
it
one out of the
honestly,
pit?
I'm sorry, I'm crying right now. It's funny. This happens all the time with you guys because I find that you guys know so much about a whole bunch of shit that I don't understand. And so it'll happen where we'll be talking and you'll say something. And I'm like, what? Oh my God, that was funny. All right, good stuff. When it comes to pre-recording, we were talking about the importance of today is that this conversation revolving around online training, electric boogaloo, is that it's going to be tactical. So not just talking from a more like an observatory perspective of these are the industry trends and some of the challenges that we've seen, but specifically if this is something that you either are currently doing and that you want to refine it, or if there's something that you're contemplating doing and you're not sure necessarily how, we're hoping that today will be a little bit of a springboard of tactical recommendations and also concrete recommendations and considerations for you when you're either launching or refining your product. That's the idea. And I think that there's, how would I say, where perhaps we should start today is this initial conversation revolving around, well, like, what's your service offering going to look like? What's your structure going to look like? Because as I think we will soon discuss and discover together, the rates flow outward of the service model. The service model is likely reflective of your client's objectives. And so that influences things like your intake process, the expectations that you have with your clients, perhaps the contracts, like the minimum times that you work with people, if that's something that you implement, because not everybody does, the assessments that you do, if I didn't say that already, and much more. And so really, I think that would be a really good place to start today if you guys are on board with that. And so when it comes to, let's say, creating your offer for online training, let's say you have a client, or excuse me, a trainer who's in front of you who's asking you this question: how should I structure my online or hybrid offering? What would you say?
Follow your heart. I
Yeah.
feel like it's going to be different for different people. Like we've talked about our different offerings as well. And I think we touched on this last time, is that kind of, if you've got more clients, you've got a great breadth of clients, but you might not be able to get the same depth with each of those clients. So I think maybe that's the first question you got to ask yourself is how involved do I want to be with this client? Or do I just want to have a whole whack of clients that I'm able to kind of influence lightly?
Okay. Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would add to this as well. I think knowing the type of client that you're intending on working with, and that could be a really narrow scope. I would, to steal ET's phrase that you use a lot, like niche down. I don't always agree with that, but I actually think in this case, to some degree, that's something that is important. So, for example, the vast majority of clients that I work with are physique type clients. I've had some strength clients as well, but even my clients that maybe aren't necessarily competitors, they're usually people that are looking for some kind of body composition change. They're almost always intermediate or above in terms of their level of experience. And that's typically the population that I work with. Depending on the client goal and their particular needs and whatnot, if someone really wanted to work with me, could I take on some cases that were an exception? Probably, like we all could. But like if somebody came to me with aspirations of being a distance runner, I'm sending them to one of you two. Mm-hmm. If someone is coming to me with, I would say if they're like a high level power lifter, like if you had somebody who was a beginner and intermediate, like I've had my toes in those ponds before, so I'm capable. But if you were somebody looking to break national records and world records, like I'm probably not your guy. So I think understanding the type of client that you are trying to appeal to and that you want to work with, not only does that allow you, I think, to have a little bit more success because you can focus on the skills that you need to bring as a coach to work with that individual. The other thing that I think it does is it also streamlines what your service is, and therefore also, as you had mentioned previously, kind of like what your intake process is like. Mm-hmm. So I know when I'm working with physique clients, I've worked with enough of them, and I myself go through this process as like a competitor as well. I know the behaviors that are required to yield the best results. I know the information required, like the data required to make informed decisions. And that tells me the questions that I need to ask them and the systems that I need to set up to acquire that information from them during their check-in process, et cetera. So by having a much more niche down type of clientele, the types of questions that I know that I need to ask them, they're very streamlined. If I was working with a much broader type of clientele, I don't think I would be able, at least personally, like I don't think I'd be able to do that to the same degree.
So Ryan, you've mentioned before, and I like it that it's really beneficial to like cut your teeth in like a larger gym or at least a gym at all and kind of like know what you're good at, learn some things. So that would really help somebody niche down a little bit, having that prior knowledge. If we've got a particular trainer who's going straight into online training, you know, just got a certification and want to like get started in this, is there a way that a trainer can kind of figure out what makes them special?
If I may, I'll just jump
Go
in.
ahead,
I would just say, honestly, follow your interests initially. You know, so if you want to work with Gen Pop, start there. I think that or if you love bodybuilding, you love hypertrophy and, you know, physique, I would say start there. And then as you take a step, you know, life reflects things back to you and you learn. And so that's what I would say. I would just say pick something you like and start there personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm probably going to be a little bit tougher on this. Sure. My first advice would be just start in a gym. I think that there are, in my experience, or at least from what I've observed, I think there are two types of, I'll rephrase that. I think there's three types of online fitness professionals that succeed. And there is some overlap amongst these three, but there are those that have extensive experience working with clients one-on-one in either a private gym setting or a corporate gym, something along those lines. So, you know, they get all of their reps in, so to speak, in person. They acquire all of those skills before moving on their own. I also think that there's a category of online coach that comes from an academic background. So people that have credentials like a master's degree or potentially PhD in a particular field, and that qualifies them in the eyes of the public to be a source, like an expert. And then I think the third type is somebody who excels in the sport that they're trying to coach. So if you want to be a bodybuilding coach, you probably need to be a pretty good bodybuilder or a really good powerlifter or a great runner. Like, I think you need to have had the competitive experience within that sport. Do I think that makes you likely a better coach? Probably to a certain degree. But I think the big thing here is the perception from your prospective clients. If you don't have any formal education, if you have no in-person experience, and you haven't actually accomplished anything within the sport that you're trying to teach, the likelihood that people are going to come to you as an expert and pay you money is just very low. So I think that, like I said, if you don't want to work, if you don't want to, you know, get a master's degree, if you don't want to be a 260-pound bodybuilder, well, that leaves you with the third option, which is you probably need to cut your teeth in a corporate gym. So I think one of those three you need to be heavily invested in my opinion, to be a good online coach.
I think that's a fair point.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I think if we are asking ourselves, okay, what might be quote unquote optimal? Like if we were to give someone a recommendation of how can I succeed, for sure, I would agree. If If we bring it back to one of the things that you were talking about, Rye, when we're talking about, I guess, how to structure your service offering, you were talking about it, is it a bodybuilder or is it someone who's doing endurance? And if it would be endurance, maybe you would send them to someone else, and et cetera. I think that one of the first questions to ask ourselves when it comes to how we structure the offering, and that which also informs, like you had mentioned, the assessment, the software that you'll use, we need to ask ourselves, like, who are these people? And perhaps there would be two questions to answer there, which would be, what are their needs and goals? But then also from your perspective, from, I guess, the stance of the wise one, the one with experience and know-how as to how to guide people. So also to ask ourselves, what might be some of their challenges that that they're going to push up against that they may not know that they're going to push up against? And that could inform perhaps the type of support that you offer. And I'll give like a concrete example of this. So previously, my online offering was either online training only, no calls, or online training with 1 call a month, online training with 2 calls a month. That's how it worked for just for the like purely online stuff. And actually, through conversations with Rye, I changed my offering. Because from what I recall, and I don't know if you still have this model, but it was essentially flat fee and you can check in however often you need. It can be 0 times a month. It can be 8 times a month if you're in crisis.
That's exactly what I do still. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought about that. And initially I was like, I can't do that because I got needy people and I just won't be able to service that volume. And then I looked at the patterns. Like I looked at my call log and I was like, fuck, I haven't talked to this client, even though they're paying for 2 calls a month. They haven't booked them in for 2 months. And this other client who can maybe only afford one has gone through multiple crises, and I've either said like, no, or I would bend my rule and give them more support. And then I also reflected on just like the people that I work with. Who are they? I've got some endurance athletes. I got some chronic pain people. I've got some folks who travel a lot for work, etc. And all of these people need a lot of flexibility. Athletes might need a little bit more check-ins in the weeks leading up to an event. Like I had a client run essentially a half marathon this past weekend. So leading up to it, there was like a lot of questions and concerns. And so it was all kind of over WhatsApp, but there was the possibility of potentially booking multiple calls if you needed. Clients who, let's say, are traveling for work and they're going to be doing 16-hour days, quite literally nonstop, barely any time to sleep. There's no fucking time for their consistent kind of 2 calls a month during that month. And so when I looked at it, I realized that like, damn, my avatar and the people that I serve need a lot of flexibility. How can I offer that flexibility? Well, then it would be to offer an all-included or an all-inclusive training package, which is flat fee, and you can book 6 calls a month if you need to, 45 minutes a pop, or you can book none, and it's completely totally up to you. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up is that I think that like, there's an element of iteration, which is normal, but reflecting on what are the needs of the people as a means of informing your offering, which also then makes your offer more sexy. And then the client can see that this is something that they need. Like if there's logic behind how it's structured,
I actually want to speak on that. That's actually really cool. I had no idea that
I don't want to pump your tires, man.
I've got a big enough ego as it is. But yeah, I do want to speak on that a little bit because that was a really conscious choice when I was originally figuring out, again, like what was kind of the service model. So I think relative to the norm, not exceedingly so, but like my rate is probably higher than the average online coach. Now, to be fair, I know coaches that are charging in the thousands per month, so I'm nowhere close to that. But a big thing that I really ran into when I was trying to think about how to structure offerings was, I'm sure like you guys and like a lot of people, it sounds kind of hokey, but I do think that we all get into this because we want to help people.
100%.
And I kept, every time I try to have some kind of tiered system, when I was trying to write it out, I kept getting faced with this problem, which was, how am I going to gatekeep caring about people?
Yeah, for sure.
And that was like a problem I couldn't reconcile. So as you said, like, what if you have a client that, they're going through some massive life changes? And the reality is, if you think you're going to become a trainer or a coach and not be a pseudo therapist for your clients, you're kidding yourself. You're a part of their support system. So yeah, to your point, like, I've had multiple calls with clients, sometimes within a week for a couple of weeks, because they were just like, shit was hitting the fan in their lives. And I've got other clients where, we'll still check in via text, or they have their check-in forms and stuff. So I also send clients looms throughout the week, as I'm sure you do as well. And I got clients that are like, yeah, man, I'm good. And I literally might not talk to them face to face for a couple of months.
Yeah.
I might book one just to be like, hey, I think like it'd be just cool to see your face and
my client
get on
Jason,
the
same
page.
deal right now. I'm just like,
Yeah.
what is happening in Jason's life? Everything looks fine. It's green lights in his check-in forms and he's happy, but like, it's radio silence the vast majority of the time. And I'm like, I feel like I need to check in with this person.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah, so I sent him an email yesterday to do exactly that, which is funny.
But yeah, and that was kind of the thing that I always ran into, was just, I couldn't be in a situation where I had a client that had potentially a huge need and I would say no unless they paid me more money. Like that, the whole thought
Yucky.
just like made me feel really gross.
Yeah.
So that's where, again, it came up with, as I said, I just thought of it as like a subscription service. I'm stuttering over here, where it's like, yeah, it's a flat rate per month, and you essentially have as much access to me as you would want. Now, there are times where maybe I won't be able to accommodate that immediately if I'm busy, but I will do so as quickly as possible. Especially having clients that compete, if it's feasible for me, like, I go to my clients' shows too. So I think if Eric just did the Canadian Nationals back in the first weekend of October, I drove down there. I paid for my own hotel. I spent 2 days with him. Like, that's money out of my pocket. Yes, it's a business expense, but it's still money. Like, the ROI, like, I took a loss as a coach in terms of what he paid me that month and what I paid.
Yeah, for sure.
And to me, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Now he's at a period of time where he's in his off season, and there's a little bit less, attention that he needs, because these things come in seasons, right? And similarly, my client Rosina, who I've talked about a lot on here, she's going to be competing next year, and I will do my damnedest to make my way out to Vancouver to watch her. I've got a client that's going to compete in California next year, same thing. And I don't think that that's unique. I think there's a lot of coaches that do that. But I think if you gatekeep the level of care and empathy that you have with your clients, they're going to feel that at some point.
Yeah.
And all of the technical skills, all of the cute AI stuff that you can do it with apps and stuff these days, which I'm turning into an old guy. I don't even know what 90% of them do anymore. Ultimately, what matters, I actually remember one of the first podcasts we ever did with Nick Shaw. And even he talked about this, like, the most important thing is to give a shit about people.
Yeah.
And I think that your service and, downstream your pricing model should reflect that.
Yeah, 100%.
I have a question for you guys regarding kind of that level of care. I find that when I start with clients in person, the first few weeks to a month is a lot of information. Like, I'm like hoarse after our first few sessions just from chatting. And it's back and forth, sure, but is a certain amount of info I want to download onto them so they are aware, the obvious things: my body's strong, capable, resilient, adaptable, plus all the little bits. It's a lot of education with an online client that you've got kind of limited direct contact with. Do you guys struggle with getting that information out to clients, or is there a way that you guys have figured out to get that way?
So I'm way more relaxed about it than I used to be through and what you just mentioned of knowing that they're strong, capable, adaptable, they are resilient, means that they can bend without breaking. And so I'm not concerned too much of them having necessarily everything up front, because I know that I trust in my ability to reel them in and to address things as as needed, because sometimes it's not needed. I just prior to our podcast today, I was on a mentorship call with one of my clients, and we were talking about her intake process. When she's working with her clients, she does FST. And so we were talking about how she pre-frames the initial appointment and all that stuff. And her tendency is fire hose to the face at the beginning. And the feedback that because when we were talking about this, the feedback that she gave me about her intake process is I'm rushing through it because there's like so much that I need to say, her words, and I don't want to take away from the session with them on the table. My question to her was, I need you to elaborate on what you mean by need. Is it a need from the sense of that the client like actually needs it, or is it something that you feel you need to say? Those are two very different things. And what we realized through that conversation is that there was a lot of upfront stuff that she was saying that was just not necessary for the intake, and that could be broached semi kind of reactively in response to, you know, what the client tables. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's initially what came to mind for me. Ryan, do you have anything else or something different?
It's helpful.
Yeah,
sure.
I would say, I'm kind of in the same boat where I'm a lot more chill about it these days. There's also a reason why one of the things I said right off the beginning is most of the clients that I work with are sort of like intermediate or above, because the types of things that if I was working with somebody in person who was a true beginner, there's a lot of hand-holding there. And I'm honest that just if that type of client came to me, I don't think, maybe for me, maybe there are online coaches who are better at it than I am, but I don't think it's the right service for them at that time. And I think that working with somebody in person to go over all those foundational, aspects of fitness is probably better. So the people that I'm usually working with, they've got years in the gym. They know a thing or two about a thing or two. So I don't feel like I've got to give them everything at the beginning. Most of the information I'll give them initially is things pertaining to essentially just like the data collection side of things. I'll give them an idea of some of like what my philosophies are around training and diet as that comes up in conversation, because I'll always have like an initial call with prospective clients, which is maybe something we should talk about too. And I will give them information as to the things that I require from them in terms of their check-ins. So, for example, like doing their progress photos, I'll tell them, I'm like, have something that has like a well-lit area. The background isn't overly crowded. Don't have a window behind you because that backlighting will like black or like shadow your physique and stuff like that. So I'll give them information that I require from them for each of their subsequent check-ins. And then after that, most of the information that I'm giving to them is just as things come up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something, part of the pre-frame is I tell clients, I'm like, there's no dumb question. I'm like, trust me, I've answered some dumb questions over a decade and a half.
Yeah.
So like, ask me anything, I will answer it.
Yeah.
I might make fun of you afterwards, but yeah.
If I may, just, I know you have something you want to say there, Brett, but then, and also just if like, that's something, I don't know if you would agree with this. I love when clients are engaged. I can't stand it when clients are just like dead fishing the training relationship. It's just like, I'm sorry.
Totally agree.
It's the best. It's the only way to say it. It's so just like unsatisfying. But like if
my brain lights up like a Christmas tree when somebody asks a good question that you have to like think about, I'm like, oh.
Well, dude, Deb, right? And like, I think you've probably seen her transformation. It's been just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Deb, it was a referral to me via essentially Brett and an old client of mine, Jenna, and Deb was like fire hose to the face with questions. Like the amount of time that I spent with her was disproportionately high during our time together in comparison to everyone else. And I absolutely loved every minute of it. And it's so great to give to people that want to receive,
One thing
so
that I want to, all good. No, I just wanted to like focus in on something that you said, Ryan, about, if somebody does require more hand-holding, maybe online training isn't the right choice. And it's something we talked about before, like feel free to refer out when somebody doesn't match your expertise or whatever it have be, or your offerings. And so like, I think having the confidence of saying, listen, it sounds like you need a bit more help than online training will provide. I don't provide in-person training, but here are some trainers that do. You can reach out to them, I think is a great idea too. Something I hadn't considered.
Yeah, I think I'll say one thing briefly on that. I do think it's worth highlighting the referring out conversation, whether that's to, in-person trainers, other online coaches, other health professionals. It's one of those things where, number one, we talk about, congruency of care. Like, is it the right thing for that person? And that should ultimately be the thing that informs that decision on your part. But even if it was a purely selfish act, if you have clients that are not good fits for your service or your skill set, you're probably not going to do as good a job with them. The results are going to be worse. This will reflect poorly on you as a professional. So, again, I bring this example up because it's quite obvious. But if I had someone whose aspirations were to run a marathon, and I'm going to do a horrible job, like I'm going to do a bad job with that person. Just not going to take them on because I don't want to waste their time, and they would do much better than somebody else. But I'm going to look like an asshole that just took their money and yielded a horrible result with a client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the opposite. I mean, concretely, Joe, who I referred to you, I was like, I know, like Joe was referred to me by a friend, and we spent like a month together, and I'm like, I'm not the guy for this. Like, I could try to figure this out. And even if I do figure it out, I'm going to suck in comparison to Ryan. So I just connected you guys and he's crushing it. So
he's down to like 180, I think, or just above like 181, 182.
Which is a loss of like 40-ish pounds, 45?
Yeah, I think it was nearly 230.
Yeah.
Even when we started with me.
There's no fucking way what I would have been able to help him in that way, So no, it's good. And then also like to what you were saying, Brett, I think that, and this ties well in, then eventually we'll go towards pricing, because I think that's an important conversation as well, is that this also brings forth the possibility of creating a hybrid offering, which if you, if you offer online services, you can also offer the potential of people doing hybrid. And so maybe that's the same rate per month, and then they can tack on in-person sessions however you'd like. There's lots of ways to structure it. I can share with you how I structure it if you'd like. You can package it. Like there's a bunch of ways. And so if you have someone who wants the flexibility and the independence of online, and in many ways like the volume of information that comes with online that previously used to be constrained to exclusively in person. So if they want the online stuff and a little bit of handholding, then you can create some kind of online offering. Hybrid offering, excuse me. And the way that, like, for instance, that I structure that is, let's say I have my regular online rate of being X. If someone wants to do hybrid, then what we do is that X amount just gets decreased a little bit to reflect the fact that we're not going to be having as many or any calls. And then there's the addition on an hourly basis, 1 or 2 sessions a month. And they usually, what they do is they buy a package of X amount that kind of sits in the system. They have a certain amount of value waiting for them. And we work through them at a rate that makes sense of, once a week or twice a month and stuff like that. And honestly, it works really, really, really well, because I have a client right now who I did online with when I was in Geneva. He's based out of Ottawa. We did online together and it was bad. It did not go well. A lot of issues with accountability, and he just had a lot of trouble making it stick. And so what we're doing now is we're doing in person twice a week. We've been doing that for about a month or 6 weeks. We were going to reevaluate at the beginning of November to be like, how are things going, with the aim of hopefully decreasing the in-person and giving him more independence. And he's just like, I'm not ready. Like, not at all. And I was like, no problem. Let's go month by month. We'll keep doing twice a week, and we'll reevaluate early December. And, we kind of go from there. But it comes back to, like you guys have said, it comes back to what's the right thing for this person, and actually giving a shit and doing the right thing as per what they need, and not just your own selfish needs. Anything you guys want to add on that?
Well, I was just kind of wondering how you guys would schedule out your day with, say, like exclusively an online group. Like, do you have like a block that's just programming, a block that's just client communications?
Good question. Yeah. Ryan, do you want to take this first?
Sure, yeah. And this is something we talked about just before we came on. And I will preface this by saying, having come from an over decade long in person career where, you're, especially when you start getting kind of the same clients for years and years, your schedule is the same every week, every day for months, sometimes like years on end. So I had a very rigid schedule for like basically the last 5 years of my career. Because I'd switch a client once or twice a year. But the other 12 or 13 that I had, I just with the same clients. So initially going fully online was a huge breath of fresh air. The flexibility was amazing. But I actually initially struggled in a way that I didn't think that I would, holding myself accountable to a schedule. So what I will say, and this might be different for everybody, how I actually worked my way backwards was ultimately like, what's the thing that I care about the most? And what is the thing I will always do every day? And that was my own training. So I actually started with scheduling my own training time every day and then started to work my work hours kind of around that. So my workflow, the way that it is sort of set up is I've got my training times, set up Monday through Saturday. I take Sundays off and I have a handful of in-person clients. I work, 5 to 10 hours a week at most. So those are blocked off. They're sort of the same times. I don't have clients throughout the day. It's like there's a narrow window at the beginning of the day and there's a narrow window in the afternoon. And those are the only times I will take in-person clients. And then essentially I have a like block where it's like, this is when I do client feedback for their training. Like I do all my looms, I send them to them. Most of my clients, their check-in forms are like Sundays. So I will give them a response Monday morning. So it's like Monday mornings, I don't take a client. And Monday mornings are all my check-in forms for clients. So I kind of structure my week out that way. And then I tend to give myself, especially Fridays, but usually Thursday, Friday, most of the necessary client work is done. And then essentially that's my day to like pick up any outstanding work that I might have, obviously with the exercise mechanic, if there's anything I need to do for this. I've got a speaking engagement at Ottawa Youth. So that's kind of my time to focus on other stuff. And then essentially client communication, the way that I do it is you can text me. I do it via WhatsApp, but essentially you can text me between like, I'm up at 6 every day. So it's like by 6 o'clock and literally my workday ends when Shannon gets home because then I want to put my phone away. So it's like from 6 a.m. to like 7 p.m. You could text me anything. I'll answer you. Like I can hop on a quick call if you need to, like all of that kind of stuff. So everything gets booked within that window. And then phone goes away unless I'm just doom scrolling at 7:30 at night. And that has worked better for me. It's not perfect. It's actually one of the reasons eventually this background will be here and there'll be a much nicer background, but we're renovating one of our bedrooms into a more distinct office space.
Nice.
So that my workflow is that much more rigid. But for
Love it.
me, it started with like, selfishly, my own training is kind of always the priority. And then I just kind of worked my schedule backwards from that and then tried to figure out what keeps me accountable to accomplish all the tasks that need to be done throughout the week in a timely manner.
It's really interesting because you and I have never talked about this, but our strategies are almost identical. So I start off my day. So Monday to Friday, our training times are allocated. So from 7 a.m. till 10 a.m., there's no clients that can book in. That time is reserved. And then what we look at is Mondays are my busiest day with regards to getting back to clients and making sure that everything is all set up for the week, et cetera, or the weeks, excuse me. And so that's all done on Mondays. Tuesday to Friday after training time, ideally, there's some caveats here, but ideally there's a block allocated for daily check-ins. So there's a larger check-in time on Monday, and then Tuesday to Friday, there's little kind of micro check-ins to make sure that there's no major accumulation and I'm checking in every single day. And then the other client times are kind of added in, in the schedule wherever it makes sense. I've got some mentorship clients. I've got some in-person clients at the clinic. and that's it. And then, like booking in the podcast, booking in time to work on content creation, which is a really big push that we're making right now, which takes hours every day.
Dude, you're a better man than me. I hate that. I feel like I'm getting worse.
Yeah, you are getting worse for sure.
Because I've had this is not related to our conversation at all, but yeah, I need to find this balance of, I feel like I'm progressively developing a bigger hatred for social media and the internet. And it's like, how do I balance that and doing things that are actually good for my job, which I will say I have not figured out that balance.
Ryan, I thought it was just me. I've also I was on a pretty good run late summer, and then like I just got so sick of the algorithm, and it's like pulling teeth. I think the end result is I should probably hire out if I hate it this much and pay somebody to do it for me.
To be fair, that was when I was doing my best, was I would just film stuff and write it, but I would outsource everything else, because I think similar to you, Brett, sorry that we're going on a tangent here, ET.
It's okay.
But I don't know if other people struggle with this maybe as much as maybe we're like,
everybody does, man. Honestly,
anymore.
I'm going to jump in. Like, yeah. I'm exactly like you guys as well. I hate it. If I could outsource, I would. I just don't have the capital in the business to be able to do that. I'll share with you my tip if you want.
Sure.
Because we're making a really big push right now, and it's something that we're going to continue to do. What do you hate more? Do you hate not progressing? Or are you going to let your short-term kind of hatred of the fact that you suck at it win?
Okay, so here's why I will actually differentiate.
Here we go.
Again, Brett,
we have 30 seconds, then we need to get back on topic.
I'll be curious if you feel this way, Brett. It's actually more so as a consumer being exposed to more content. So it's actually not creating content, because I made a reel that took me 2 minutes, and it's gotten, I think, 45,000 views and like over 1,000 likes on it. Like, it did really well, and I put fuck all effort into it. Clearly just people like things with steroids, and that's why. But it's the act of, by making stuff, I'm on Instagram or TikTok, if that's what you use. I don't use it. And there's this, I think as an ADHD person, I then have this compulsion, and then I'm looking at stuff, and I find actually the exposure to content online is something I'm actually trying to avoid. So it's less the creation part and more so actually the exposure as a consumer is the thing that I'm trying to avoid. And that is a weird struggle for me that hopefully I'm not the only one.
There's a line in a song in Bo Burnham's special Inside that was released in the pandemic. I love that special. It's so well done. But the line in one of the songs that is the backlash to the thing that's just begun. And it just feels like social media in a nutshell. It's just like people reacting to reactions. And it's like never ending.
Yeah. Like I said, man, I honestly relate with you guys 100%, and I honestly can't stand it. I mean, you guys, when you come over for dinner on Saturday, my wife will be there.
It's the algorithm getting rid of them.
Yeah, there we go. Back.
Zuckerberg heard you.
Meta's like, we're gonna like cancel this guy. But like when you guys come over on Saturday, you'll have the chance to ask my wife this if you want, and it's like I will be in the office recording, and I'll exit, and I'm like, fuck, I hate my life. I feel like a dancing fucking monkey. And then I go back into the office to edit it. And it's not fun. But there's a huge part of the loathing that I have, which is associated with the fact that I haven't gotten the results that I'd want, for sure, which is just associated to me kind of creating content that people don't give a shit about. So I need to figure out how to create stuff that people actually are interested in watching and consuming and learning. And then also there's just the feeling like you suck at something, and it just takes time to get good at it. And the thing that's forcing me to do the work is like, I don't want 2026 to be a repeat of 2025. I will hate myself if that happens. And so the thing that I hate more is stasis. And so I'm willing to put in the work and the reps to kind of, make the changes. Seems like our connection is a little spotty right now. Yeah.
I like the irony that in Switzerland you had a better connection, and now that you're a stone's throw away, it's worse.
Yeah. I mean, it's Rogers, man.
They couldn't take that Blue Jays money and give you a better connection.
Yeah, exactly. So all that, let's bring it let's bring it back to just at least for a moment.
I mean, it's applicable. If you're an online coach, you're probably going to have to do most of your marketing online.
It is. We're gonna circle back to this for sure. But if we come back to the whole notion of creating your offer, because we're still in part one of this discussion, you're still in so you created your offer. You have an idea of what they need. Great. The next question is, can I deliver this? And the thing that you need to ask yourself is you need to ask yourself, what is going to be, you need to consider what's going to be the time cost associated with delivering that service. And you also need to consider what are your needs and or what you would like to make as from an income perspective. And so you have this kind of Venn diagram of just what are the needs of the clients and what are my needs, and those overlap. And what that means is that you may make some compromises on either side as a means of finding some kind of initial sweet spot of what you launch and what you start. And if I bring it back to, what we were talking about earlier, when we were talking about how I recently changed my service model to offer something unlimited based off of Ryan and I's conversation. And interestingly, what that did is it decreased the rate for some clients and it increased the rate for others. So it didn't increase peak cost, but it raised the basement, so to speak. And so some clients were like, sick. We were booking in 1 to 2 calls a month at X rate. Now that same service is less. Okay, sweet, sign me up. And they were super happy with that, of course. And then there's other clients that were like, I was initially paying for like 1 and now I get unlimited and now it's a little higher. And ultimately it was totally fine. And there was no churn, which was great. But there was a risk there, right? And like if there was a client who had a really hard line financially, I would have lost them. But when I looked at everything, it was a decision that was worth making, and I committed to it, and it's been fruitful so far.
I think something that you said there is really important. I think we discussed a little bit on the previous podcast about, working your way backwards in terms of how much money do you want to make or how much do you need to make, and sort of reverse engineering that, which is an important conversation. But I also think, we were discussing earlier in this podcast about essentially having like a certain number of credentials for people to take your services seriously. I also think that there's a perceived value of higher ticket items.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there is this tendency, or there's this appeal to want to scoop in the bottom of the market and like be the guy that charges $50 or $100 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Good luck paying your bills. Like you're going to have 150 clients to do that.
At least.
That is just not feasible, or at least like that's probably not feasible.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is, when you have an item that is so below the market average, people don't take it very seriously. If you have something that is, a meaningful expense for them, they're going to take it more seriously, and they're going to perceive you probably as a more valuable asset, for them to have. I'm reminded of a conversation I had when I was still working in person. And I think he was a level 1 trainer, and I was at the time a level 5. So I don't remember what that rate was. Maybe it was $125 an hour or something like that. And I pretty much had a roster where I was working 140-ish hours every single month, had good sales. And he was struggling, as a lot of like newer trainers do. And he had asked me, he's like, do you not find it like really hard to sell training like when you're so expensive? I'm like, nope, it's easier.
Mm-hmm.
Now, part of that is very likely by that point, your confidence is much higher. I probably come across much more just relaxed and I know what I'm talking about. But also there were people that would come into our gym and they'd go, I only want a trainer who's a level 4 or higher.
Yep.
There's this perceived value because it's this higher ticket item. So I also think that sweet spot's going to be a little bit different for everybody. I've had this conversation actually even with a friend of mine she's a very good online coach and a great competitor. And I told her once, I think it was the beginning of the summer, because she was struggling with her business. I was like, your rates are too low. Charge $125 an hour. There's worse coaches than you charging double that. So now I'm not going to tell you what you should charge, but it should certainly be more than what you're charging.
Mm-hmm.
So I think don't be afraid to charge. I don't want to say a lot, but don't be afraid to charge what you're worth.
Mm-hmm. And
I agree.
so that I had this happen very recently with a potential in-person client. We were emailing a bit back and forth. We had a few little chats, and she was shopping around and was pretty open about that with me, and came back to me and, politely and respectfully was like, your rates are on the higher end of what I've seen. Can you explain why? And without getting defensive, I just briefly explained, here's my level of experience. Here's what we're going to do together and why, this is going to be a better offering than some other trainers that you might see. But in the end, the choice is yours. And so it wasn't you can just explain that to people, your reasoning why, without getting defensive, because I know money and what you're worth can really get people on edge. If somebody's questioning well, why do you think you're worth that much? Can be a bit insulting. But if you take a little step back and just present it factually, I think the clients are going to respect you a lot more for it.
Agreed. Okay, so this is really good. So I think we talked about a lot of things. One of the last categories I'd like to dive into in our last 10-ish minutes or so here is the intake process and perhaps the assessment process. Of course, online is very different than in person. I'm not even going to assume. This whole process will depending on the person that you're with. If you're working with physique athletes like Ryan, or if you're working with runners, or if you're working with chronic pain people, so all this stuff will be different. But how do you guys, actually, Brett, we'll start with you, because I know that this is not necessarily something that you're currently doing a lot of right now, but how would you work through the intake process? If you were to launch an online business, what would you consider? And then Ryan, we'll go to you after.
So I do have, usually my first meeting with a client will be a bit of an intake assessment. There won't be as much physical work. I find that I get a lot more out of clients when I'm just chatting with them. And so usually I'll just block off an hour-long conversation with them. I've got a few questions that I always ask, but usually try to keep the conversation free-flowing, because part of it is just to determine, is this client a good fit with me? Are we going to work together well? And then part of it is determining what their needs are and creating a plan for them. So when I do physical tests with folks, it's usually pretty simple. It's pick 6 exercises that cover the basic movements, see how they move, how comfortable and confident they are with their movements, and kind of create a plan for there. But we've gone over physical assessments before and how none of us love treating them as fear for clients, you're moving wrong here, we're going to have to fix that. But just to get a sense of how confident, comfortable, how strong they look, maybe you can load it up if they're not dealing with pain or injury and see kind of what their strength levels are currently. But that's generally it, is about an hour or 30 minutes to an hour conversation with a client where we're just kind of hashing it out and chatting a little bit.
Awesome. Ryan?
Yeah, I would say, so if I think of my whole intake process, so it starts with, the vast majority of clients that I get now are either referrals or through social media, they'll reach out to me. And from there, we'll book always an initial, people call them discovery calls, but I'll have an initial call with somebody. And even if it's somebody that I actually know quite well, I still want to have a formal call at the beginning. I think it just establishes a level of professionalism. And I like it to be like this, face to face, not a phone call. And typically, I'll have questions about just what their training program has been. Again, context here is I'm predominantly working with bodybuilders, but what their training has looked like recently, what their diet has looked like recently. If they're an enhanced competitor, what have they done? Do they have recent blood work? So essentially just any information that I might need off the hop that would inform sort of those first iterations of their diet or their training program. I tend to find that's relatively quick, but I like keeping a lot more time open because especially if you're talking about competitive bodybuilders, these are people that care about a competitive outcome. And there is a conversation a lot about what's the expectation in terms of, what does their off season look like? What does a prep look like? These are people that want to win stuff, right? So there's almost a little bit, I don't want to say more care to their training. That's just a different type of care. Their training is their sport. So I find just having an opportunity to discuss that is really important. And then I do all my billing through our website, which is through Stripe. So that makes the billing side really easy. And even though I do my own sort of intake in that initial part with a client, when they sign up, because I have an app that I use with them as well, I still get them to do an initial questionnaire within that, especially when it comes to things like detailing their diet, their food preferences, things like that. And I tell them ahead of time, like, look, I know this seems a little bit redundant. I'm dumb and I need to read this, and it's easier for me to read it if it's all one place. And I will tell them that, for example, a thing that's really big for me is, when we look at diets, the best diet's the one that you can follow. So if we can incorporate foods that you like eating and you're used to eating and are easy for you to prepare, I'm gonna take the foods that you give me and do my best to create a diet there. And I tend to find, a lot of those sort of pre-framing the expectations of their behaviors in that initial call really helps. And then they're on board as to understanding like why I'm asking them to do those things. But yeah, it's generally, getting to know them as a person, getting to know what their expectations are, what matters to them, and then just collecting data that is relevant to them as a physique athlete.
Awesome. I love that. That was really thorough. And surprisingly, and it's funny because we haven't talked about this before, literally ever. I don't think you and I have ever talked about the back end of how we structure things, but there's a lot of similarities. So if we think of, if there's a new client coming in for me for either, let's just go purely online, because in person, if a client starts, you have an initial session, you have an assessment, and then off you go. Online, there's a little bit of a different process because I want to make sure I have the information that I need to deliver the service effectively. So before the discovery call, there's a quick discovery call form that I get them to complete. And it's essentially an intake form, but it's like 1/6 of my actual intake form. And it's really simple. It's basically like, what are your goals? How important are they to you? And what is going to attempt to get in your way of you succeeding? I think that's one of the questions. And then we kind of like, and then, yeah, how committed, and then we book it, we hop on the call. And then during that discovery call, that's where I would talk about their goals, kind of initially talk to them about the pricing and those types of things. Let's say the client buys in, they say yes, fantastic. I send them an invoice, their initial invoice, and then we book their intake call. Prior to the intake call, so and on an email that I send them, that's like, here are your steps that I need you to do. I need you to create your accounts on either TrueCoach or Final Surge, which is what I use for the delivering of the like endurance training, or both, because I have some clients that I use both. So basically, it's like, here's you should have received an email invitation already, but if not, click these links, finalize the setup of your accounts, and download them to your phone. Then from there, it's book in your intake call. And so there's a link via Calendly. I don't know if we lost Brett. Hopefully not. There's a link to my Calendly where they can just go and book in their intake. And then there's also a Google form immediately beneath it. That's like, click on this as well, because I need you to complete your intake form. And the intake form has a health questionnaire. It has lifestyle questions. How's the quality of your poop? How's the quality of your sleep? Do you wake up dry mouth? Are you thirsty in the morning? What kind of diet do you follow? So I kind of like broad stroke stuff, so I can better understand the person that I'm working with. And then on the intake call, the focus for me is primarily building rapport. That's first and foremost. Let's get to know this person. How do they tick? I review the intake questionnaire. So we go through it, because who knows, sometimes, I'm sure you've seen it before. You start bringing things up and then they expand on it. Oh yeah, it turns out it wasn't a light concussion. I got hit by a car. And you're like, oh, noted. Just kind of good to know, right? So that whole process of like going through the intake and the questionnaire. And then interestingly, one of the things that you mentioned that I wrote down as well is expectations. I asked the client, what are your expectations of me? How do you want to be coached? So I asked them all those questions. Brett, welcome back. Everything good? Did you lose us there?
No, it was my my kid's elementary school calling. So it's just like,
Got it. Okay.
A little bit
Perfect.
of panic. He's all good. We got flu
Okay.
shots yesterday.
That's good. That's
He's a
good.
little feverish. We're good.
Welcome back, man. Yeah, so we go over expectations of me. So I asked them, like, what would a successful coaching relationship look like? What are your expectations of me? Like, how frequently do you expect me? Like, do you expect me to reach out, or do you just expect me to be responsive when you ask questions? Once again, how would you like to be coached? Do you like tough love? Do you want me to tell you just like, hey, like, quit being an idiot, do the thing? Or are you the kind of person that needs to be massaged a little bit? So those are some questions that I ask. And then I'll also then pre-frame what the journey will look like. I find that it's important for clients. Sometimes clients will have an expectation that it'll be linear and hunky-dory and there's unicorns and rainbows. But in reality, there's usually a lot of challenges. Did it freeze again? Did it freeze again? What is happening? Where did I lose you guys? You're muted, my friend. Sorry.
Hunky dory was the last thing you said.
Right. Okay. Hunky dory. So a lot of clients will have this expectation that it's going to be linear and hunky dory, unicorns, rainbows, etc. But in reality, as you guys both know, very rarely is that the case. And there's going to be ups and downs and peaks and valleys, and letting them know that that will happen unless you're a statistical anomaly. That's going to happen. And that isn't evidence that you are doing anything wrong. It isn't evidence that you are failing. It just is the journey. And so having conversations around that to prepare them for the journey is really important. And then the next piece is about establishing an initial training strategy. And so a lot of my clients don't have really aggressive nutritional interventions that are required for their goals. So normally we don't triple down a huge amount on nutrition right from the get-go. It's usually about like adherence to an exercise plan. Where are they going to be training? How much time do they have, or are they willing to commit to this? And then from there, the program kind of flows outwards from that conversation. And I usually really start with minimum effective dose because I want them to feel like they're succeeding. I want them to, because online can be hard enough, and so I want them to feel like they're succeeding. So I usually start with something that I know that they can do and they crush it. We get some wins and then we build on it from there. But that's the kind of intake process for myself.
I like it. It kind of answered one of my questions earlier about, when you've got a lot of some information you want to get across to that client and you've really kind of pared down the essential stuff that you want to get to them early, like, the resilience and the peaks and valleys of training, and condensed it. And like, this is the essential stuff that we need to get to the client before we start. The rest we can do as the plane's flying, kind of thing.
100%.
Yeah, I like a lot of those questions you asked. Two things I thought of that I will be very brief on. Important to note, you had mentioned, I think the contractor or whatever it was at the end. Yeah, you should have some kind of liability waiver of sorts. I was lucky enough, Tim, who we've had on here before, essentially they gave me what theirs was and I modified it because Tim's one of those people that wants everybody to succeed. So I had a template of a waiver form that sort of fit this industry already. The other thing that I do, because I do deal with people and their nutrition, is I actually always have them start on the Monday. So the reason being, like, let's say I had a call with them on Wednesday. Like, I might get all of their stuff done by Friday, but they got to buy groceries. And most people are probably working some kind of 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Or if you're Joe that we mentioned before, he's like 7 to midnight. Guy works like a dog. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like, again, one of those things you talk about giving people wins. So it's like, well, I want you to actually have an opportunity to buy all the groceries, cook them, and then feel like
smart.
You've got a clean slate on Monday and sort of feel, instead of feeling like you're behind because we started on the Thursday or something. So it's a really little thing, but I find that that's something that just lets it kind of be a really nice, smooth start.
Love it. We covered a lot today, ranging from like how to create your initial offer, like what are some of the questions that you consider when you're doing that, the next steps in terms of how that might affect your pricing, your intake, the challenges with for a lot of people, the inevitability of needing to market yourself on social media, which honestly, that could be an episode. We can maybe talk about that in the coming weeks. I hope you guys found this useful, guys, meaning the listeners. Actually, I also found it useful that we talked about this before recording, that usually I find that like the best way to learn is to attempt to teach, to flesh out your ideas. And so definitely picked up on some new ideas today. Wanted to appreciate you guys for setting aside the time for today's conversation. It was awesome. Internet connection aside, I think it went really well. For those that are listening, I hope you enjoyed today. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, subscribe. And if there's a fellow fitness professional that you think would also get a lot out of this episode, please do us the favor of sharing it with them, because the more eyes and ears that we have on our content and what we're attempting to do, the more that we can be successful at our mission of elevating the standard of care in the fitness industry. Hope you guys have a really fantastic day. Have a great day. That was redundant. Till next time. Bye for now.